Sometimes one of the most difficult things entrepreneurs have to do is hold people in their life and business accountable for doing what they say they're going to do, when they say they're going to do it, the way they say they're going to do it. And being a compassionate leader and balancing those two together can be very challenging, coupled with the fact that a lot of people don't really like to deal with conflict, or those that deal with conflict maybe don't do it in the most effective ways to get the results that you want. It's a very sticky thing to navigate. So that's what we're going to dive into today with my regular co-host, Jonathan Duggar. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alicia St. Germain. I have with me Jonathan Duggar, my regular co-host. I'm so glad you're back.
Me too. Good times.
Now, here's the thing. I got the privilege of having Jonathan come visit for a weekend, a long weekend recently. So it's not like we haven't been together, but man, do I really enjoy having you here to record the podcast because it's so much more fun when you're here.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
So I have been trying to record this podcast for a week now, and I've recorded it and stopped midway through, and it's been so challenging to navigate this. And I think the biggest reason is because it's definitely one of the places that is my own growth edge. Being able to give feedback, hold people accountable, especially in situations where they're really struggling. And there are so many people struggling right now. You and I, before we started recording, you had asked me if I saw an uptick in people just not really showing up for themselves and other people.
Right.
Is that how you would put it, or?
Yeah, just out of character behavior, I would say, that is very blame heavy and passing responsibility of situations and circumstances onto others or to those circumstances instead of owning the responsibility. Just an uptick in that type of behavior with people that I haven't seen it in very frequently before.
Yeah. So I don't know that I've seen so much blame heavy, and maybe you can comment on how this relates, but I see it more like people feel are very victim-y. Like
Yes.
All of these things are happening to me, and I am powerless to control anything. And so maybe that's a little more like not my fault versus blame.
Yeah. I mean, that is, you can think of the blame as the gasoline for that. That's the fuel for that. So you're relinquishing responsibility by saying this is being done to me. Mm-hmm. I'm a passive participant in this. There's nothing I can do about it. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a globalized type of blame, but that's still blaming.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are brand new to the podcast, we talk about all aspects of what it means to be a business owner and build wealth and do it from a very human place. So as we go through challenges and see things, we like to bring them to the podcast and talk about how we're handling them. And sometimes we don't have all the answers. Sometimes we've got some things to support you, but really ultimately what I want you to know is that it's a whole human experience, and you are most definitely not alone. So if you enjoy today's episode, make sure you hit the follow button or subscribe button from wherever you are listening to. We publish these podcasts every single week, and I really enjoy the platform to get to do this with you, Jonathan. So,
Oh, thank you. I can definitely say I enjoy our conversations.
Yeah. So where I find this is my growth edge, and where this podcast is coming from is recently.
Hey, do me a quick favor and explain what you mean by your growth edge.
My growth edge. So growth edge meaning like there are things that we do within our comfort zone. And then there are places where we're trying to do some new things in our business or take on some new opportunities in our business. And you're bumping up against something that feels really uncomfortable.
Right.
And so you have a choice to either shrink back and go back to your comfort zone and keep doing what you've always been doing, or you can lean into it and glean the learning and the growth out of it so that it feels really uncomfortable. But once you practice it, once you break through it, it becomes that next level for yourself that you can show up bigger and better and you get expanded in your business. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
So for me, I have found through my life, I've gone from being people pleaser, meaning I need everyone to be okay in order for me to be okay. Like what you think of me matters. So I've departed from that people pleasing piece for the most part. And what's fascinating is I think when someone's a people pleaser and they do a lot of things to get people to like them, you think that when you leave people pleasing, that you're going to be like a different person and you're going to show up differently. And I wouldn't say that I've noticed myself or anybody else for that fact. It's not that you show up differently. You're still the kind person. You still do nice things for people. You still are thoughtful. But the reason that you do it is for the sake of kindness and goodness and because it feels good to be there for other people and not because you need them to be okay.
Right.
And then the other piece is doing what we call holding space. So when someone is upset, someone who no longer people pleases can just hold space for someone to be upset and not make up a story about how I'm bad or I'm wrong or I did something where I have to fix it.
Yeah.
Right?
There's so much more power too in that place of support that's not judgment loaded, that's not agenda driven, that's just there from a compassionate, kind, and open standpoint.
Yeah.
And that's the difference where there's an agenda that drives the behavior to do whatever would fall under that people pleasing thing to a place of being kind and thoughtful, but not
attached.
Driven. Yeah. Not attached. Exactly.
Yeah, it's not, nothing has to happen because of it. So I've worked really hard to get to that place. And we talk a lot about compassionate leadership and being compassionate with people. And I find that very easy. Like if something happens and someone doesn't show up, I am not making that mean that they are slighting me. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, where are they? Are they in the hospital? What has happened? Because there's no possible way this person would not show up. Or if someone wasn't paying, I don't think that they're trying to skirt paying me. I think, well, something must have happened. So it's super easy for me to reach out to someone and say, are you okay? And I haven't made up any kind of story about that, which I think is powerful.
Absolutely.
But I've come across some situations, and I know I'm not the only one, where someone comes and they have some hard circumstances that have come up that have made it so that their performance is not where it needs to be. They're not doing what they say they said they were going to do. It's at a detriment to timelines, at a detriment to other people who I'm responsible for. And now it's that trying to navigate and have compassion for this circumstance that they're going through and hold them accountable.
Yeah.
I am like, whew, this is so challenging and I've had to do it. And I have found myself feeling dysregulated around it, meaning I'm thinking about it more than I should be. And I feel anxiety about it. I'm not in a state right now of that, but this is what it was like going through some of the experiences. It affected my family, my time with them, vacations that I was on. And that was really interesting to navigate. And so I know that when I call that my growth edge, because I had some triggers around it and some discomfort around it, I know there's more to unpack around it.
Right. There's definitely runs much deeper than anything that might seem more surface and easy and quick to change or adjust.
Right.
So,
and I think other people could relate to this, because how many people avoid conflict, tolerate people who are not performing well for them in their business, are afraid to stand up to people who work for them, and then let those people kind of run amok in the business. And I've also seen it even with other people, like talking to my friends who are employees, and they'll have like somebody who's not performing in their company. And when the leaders aren't holding that person accountable, these really good performers don't want to perform anymore.
Yeah, I've seen that as well in some consulting work I've done over the years.
Yeah. So that's what I want to unpack today.
Well, it's so interesting. I was telling you this before we started recording. When you brought up the subject area, it was already something I was actively not only thinking about, but actually working on as a possible platform for a training or workshop or something like that, or even just some guided meditation work or something. But I had dug into the area using the same terminology the same words we're using of compassionate accountability. And there's actually a psychologist that has written a book recently and has a podcast called Compassionate Accountability. And his name is Dr. Nate Rager. I think I'm saying his last name correctly, but his book is called Compassionate Accountability. And that was just a validation of how important this subject area is right now and how timely this is. So one of the things that in my own introspection on this that I've worked on, because like Alicia said, I've also taken that challenge of a lifelong of people pleasing and doing things to try and make others' situation easier in some respect, or take some of their responsibility away from them even in times. And so there's sometimes, in my mind, there's been a fine line between being helpful and compassionate and enabling potentially bad behavior, or facilitating a situation that could change to the positive. And my over-involvement, maybe kept that from happening. So I often track back to language and what the language means. And the word compassion in our society, for whatever reason, over the years has taken on a tone of passivity and weakness. And it's actually, if you look at the roots of the word and how it's seen in other cultures, compassion is an active process, and it's a very strong position, a strong standpoint to come from. And you cannot have true compassion without accountability. So accountability of self and accountability of others. So it's built into the equation. So that's one thing that I think you put at the top of the list. It's like, well, if I truly am being compassionate with this person, I have to hold them accountable. But like you were talking about triggers, and we've got to first go back to ourselves and say, okay, what is this story I'm telling myself about this situation? And where are the emotions coming from? So before you have those conversations with others, you need to have them with yourself first. And this is where mindfulness, another of my favorite subjects to talk about, combining mindfulness and compassion, mindfulness, compassion, and self-compassion. Mindfulness teaches us, part of the training in mindfulness is to withhold judgment, but remain curious. So when you do that in a situation where you're looking at these points of accountability, you examine the story and you examine it from a standpoint of accuracy, validity, proof, and sort of the way it relates to you personally. Am I saying my own story or am I talking about their story? Is this something that I'm experiencing? Or is this something that I'm wondering if they are experiencing? So that's kind of the first step into getting to that place of holding someone accountable, is examining yourself and the stories that are being told. And I think I brought this up earlier when we were talking. I even have utilized that sort of story approach. What is the story, as a way to reflect back to an individual, and sometimes in group settings too, and say, listen, this is the story I was telling myself about what you said and did, or didn't say or didn't do. How accurate is that? Can you give me some feedback on that? So utilize it as a way of getting clarity and getting to places of being able to ask clarifying questions. So it's so interesting to me when I finally made that cognitive shift, because this same doctor I was talking about, he talks about a compassion mindset, and you can't have a compassion mindset without accountability. So when I finally started making the shift to what compassion truly is, it changed my view of so many different dynamics with other people and with different situations. Because I think on some level, I was taught that compassion was a weakness. And compassion was a soft, gentle, always quiet state of being. And that can be part of it. There can be gentleness can be a part of compassion, but it's about a balanced approach to being actively involved with the betterment of yourself and others.
So it's interesting, as you're saying compassion as a weakness. I never have equated, for me personally, compassion as a weakness. But when you said the word soft, compassion definitely is like a softness, an understanding, like understanding that, maybe understanding and acceptance, like whatever is. I think that's the piece for me, is like that when something comes up, if I'm having compassion for the situation, I accept that it is what it is, and I am powerless to change any of the outcome. Yeah. There's the weakness. We got there.
There you go. Dun, dun, dun. And I think in our society, for men as well, showing compassion sometimes is, maybe this is a bit of an older model of it, and showing my age here, but I can remember language being used in the terms of basically telling you not to be kind to someone in not so many words. Toughen up. You need to show them what you're made of. Those kind of situations. But when I made that shift from compassion doesn't mean that you avoid conflict. It means you approach conflict from a standpoint of collaboration. How is this something that I can engage this other person or this situation in for effective, positive change? So it becomes an active, positive process. So it's one of those energetic things that the shift of energy is hugely powerful and hugely beneficial to everybody, can be beneficial to everybody involved.
So this made me think about tracking back to what I was saying earlier about how I assume the best in situations. I just assume. And as I'm thinking about recent circumstances and you talking about collaboration, it's what if I assumed that whoever, the person, let's say, has made a decision or is showing up in a certain way or making particular choices and don't even know the full picture or outcome of what that decision might mean for them. It could be like if you're facing having to fire someone because they're not performing, like what if they don't realize that that's where they're at based on how they're performing?
Yeah.
What if they don't realize that they're risking their reputation or their relationships with the choices that they're currently making? If you're being compassionate you would tell someone.
Yeah. And I think the piece for like you and I have, I think one of our areas, you could call it a blind spot or whatever that, I'm not sure of another term to use at this point, but we go into problem solving mode, solution mode. So sometimes when we do that, we start generating ideas of what something might be. Mm-hmm. So this place of staying peacefully neutral is also super helpful. Assume positive intention behind the person's behavior to start with, but don't put a story on it at all. Mm-hmm. It's like, but it gives you the opportunity to dive into clarifying questions, to ask about what's going on, to dive into, is it really a conflict or a challenge or not? Or is it something that's a conflict, a challenge for me, but it's not really to the situation? Or like we were talking about earlier, are there other people involved? It's like, I can deal with this. I can figure out a way around this, but these other people that are involved and are part of this responsibility equation need to be taken into account too. They need to be factored into this. So I think that positive intention piece though is really important to parse out because it's often left out of the equation. People immediately go to something negative because that's another thing that in our society, we are a blame heavy society. And in other societies where the default is assuming that the person has best intentions, starting there and then working from that standpoint, we start from shame and blame often. So Brene Brown talks about that accountability and shame are not the same thing. But in our society, often that's what we equate accountability with. So when you hold someone accountable, you immediately go into shaming them. But accountability should be, oh man, I should have written this down. I had it in my head earlier. She says something like accountability is not shame. It's inspiring and facilitating positive behavior change. Inspiring and facilitating positive behavior change. So when you can make that shift from shaming to this collaborative sort of behavior change for the better for all involved, it changes the dynamic completely too.
And so I would think to do something like that, you've got to and this is where I typically will go and where I did go is really understanding what that person's values or what's important to them. Like, what is it that they're trying to get? What is their end game?
Right.
What is their end game? And what can be really challenging is when someone's end game does not align with what you're doing in your business or in that role that they have with you.
Yep.
And if the value system isn't aligned, they may not be a good fit for your business.
Correct. And that also can give you clarity as to what's possible and what's not in terms of this positive behavior change, this collaborative approach to helping a situation be more effective or more productive. So that value alignment, you and I have had many conversations at our retreat. We had lots of conversation around value alignment. It's huge. It's everything when it comes to most relationships, but in business, it is paramount. Like it's hard to have a collaborative relationship when there's not value alignment. I didn't use the word impossible, but that's what I almost said because it is super, super challenging.
Yeah.
And that book I was talking about earlier, Compassion and Accountability, Dr. Nate mentions 3 different things that are part of that path. And value is at the top, or value is first. And then that we treat other people as capable. So we're assuming that they can do this. And then the third piece is responsibility. So gauging our own responsibility and involvement in a situation, gauging their responsibility and involvement in a situation, and then holding them to that responsibility. Because we're all responsible for our own behaviors and actions. So he basically says those 3 things, if any one of those is missing from the equation, then it's going to go awry.
Well, and so as you go through and you're piecing out? Well, first of all, I think just to give some really specifics here is number one, looking at whatever your mindfulness and your triggers are, and really being responsible for what is yours, and then getting yourself to that neutral place, and then looking at what is it that they're trying to accomplish, what's important to that other person, and is there a space or a way to collaborate and get what they're needing and you needing onto the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the accountability piece is also the boundary. If this does not happen, then this is how it's going to be handled.
Yep. Another thing from a language standpoint that just occurred to me that we often, even people that are really well trained and have a lot of experience in leadership and how to facilitate conversations and things like that, when we're in a situation where we're triggered at all, or it's something where we've seen repeated examples of bad behavior, it's really important to focus on the behavior and not the person or the personality trait or anything else. Folks, stay focused on the behavior and you center the language around that.
Mm-hmm.
And that also gives you a target, a place to actually affect change. Whereas you're just saying, if you say this person is just a lazy person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's super generalized. It's not specific. It probably is inaccurate in a lot of form and fashion, but in some behavioral component of what they're doing or not doing may appear to be lazy.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on that behavior.
As opposed to like, if the work is not completed by the timeline, then this.
Yeah, exactly.
Not if you aren't on time, but if the work is not completed on time, as an example of focusing on
and the work
behavior.
Being even
specific.
The specifics. Yeah, exactly. A, B, and C. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's very, very helpful. And I think it's worth mentioning here is there's a certain element where you've got to be unattached to the outcome because it is their choice to rise to the occasion. When you say hold someone capable, it is their choice to rise to the occasion or not.
Correct.
And maybe that's the seat. If they choose not to, then what's going to happen is they're going to leave that relationship with you, whether that looks like being fired or the partnership breaks up or whatever it is. And they're going to leave that relationship and they're going to repeat that pattern over and over and over again. Or you've held them accountable and maybe have planted a seed.
Exactly.
That when this comes up again, maybe they might start to recognize their own pattern.
Mm-hmm. And it's a training curve. There's a learning curve there on both sides, especially if there's patterns of behavior. You were talking about being people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And that made me think about when you start changing that within yourself, other people's changes are not immediate necessarily. And it may begin with like almost seeming like an end of a relationship because you no longer are providing whatever it was they were hoping to get or that they didn't have to do any because of that or whatever it was. So, but often when those relationships are meaningful or there's true connection there is a coming back together and everyone has the opportunity to evolve and learn. Mm-hmm. But it is an adjustment. But what you just said, put a mental image of sort of that ripple in the pond effect of you've planted a seed, you've initiated a process, and maybe just now is not the time and place. Using the word capability, maybe they don't have the capacity and capability at this given moment to effectively take responsibility, own mm-hmm. it, mm-hmm. make the adjustment. But who's to say they won't down the road somewhere? So I think that's a very healthy way to look at it because it's very easy to go to a place of blaming self.
Yeah.
You can feel like a failure or let yourself feel like a failure, tell yourself you're a failure if you haven't seen that change that you were hoping for.
Yeah.
But it's important to remind yourself that, again, go into that responsibility piece. You're not responsible for their behavior or their change. So only they can do that. But it is easy. I still find myself in that place sometimes of like, man, what else could I have done? What else could I have said? It feels like there was so much potential there. It feels like there was something else that could have been done.
And you and I have talked about that too. That's that quality that you and I both have, is that we see people in their potential and we see what's possible. I think that's part of what's great about coaching, right? Is that you see their potential, you see what's possible, but you cannot do it for them.
Exactly.
They have to make the choice. They have to do the hard work to do it. And when they choose not to, it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
It's so heartbreaking to watch people get in their own way. And it's not our journey. That's their journey. And so you have to like make peace with that. And that's so hard sometimes.
Yep.
At least it is for me.
No, I agree.
So
it's still a struggle for me.
Right. And so you're like, what else could I have done? What else could I have done? It's like, maybe nothing. And like you said, when there is other people involved, when this is going to affect more than just an individual, but this is going to ripple out into an organization or other people that you do business with, or it affects you personally to a point where it's affecting your family or whatever it is, you kind of have to let them go. Like, let them, I mean, you have to let it go, I think is what I'm trying to say is.
Yeah. There's a definitive line in the sand. It's like, this is, okay, that's it, at least for now.
Yeah.
Who's to say there won't be a positive change in the future? And I think one of the balancing scales for me is, I think we talked about this before we started recording a little bit, is understanding that I still have the opportunity to learn and grow from this. Yeah. So it's still a positive. I'm not framing it in a negative way because a relationship has ended or a situation has changed gone in a different direction than I had hoped for. Not painting in a negative direction, just say, I've done the best I can do. It needs to stop now. And then go to, well, what have I learned? What can I do differently? What have I gained from this? That helps me at least kind of balance those scales.
All right. So I'm about to open a can of worms.
Uh-oh.
And we don't have time to really open this. So we're going to open it.
Part two.
We're going to open this can of worms and then we're going to immediately reseal this can of worms. All right.
Oh, no, I'm not good at that part.
So I thought you've said several times is it's not that this is permanently a closed door. Sometimes it's a seed is planted, it's a ripple in a pond, and that it eventually can come back together in a really positive way. And what do you need to see from someone to trust them again?
Are we just going to leave it there?
No, I want to know.
Or are we supposed to talk about it?
What do you need to see from someone to trust them? Because I can see like where I am right now with a few relationships, the trust has been broken that I think I don't know that I would do business.
Yep. I think from a business standpoint, often it's sort of like when you get references for a person, you're looking for some external validation and some history. So they've got to show a track record of change. Mm-hmm. They've got to show a proven path to doing different, doing better. Mm-hmm. And it can't just be lip service. There's got to be some valid evidence. And it's easy to fall back, and especially if you've had a long-standing relationship that was personal and professional, it's easy to go to a place of self-blame and say, I should trust them. I shouldn't be second-guessing them. If they tell me it's true. But obviously there's a pattern that in the past, they didn't stick to that. They didn't follow through on things, whatever it has caused the split. So I think it's completely legitimate and professionally responsible to get external validation in those situations. And also get other people that you do trust that may know this person in common. have those conversations and say, have you seen effective changes? Have you seen things that they've done differently? And that can go either way. If that person, if they had a pattern of behavior that was like that over time, you're probably not the only one that they've had that effect on.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay. We're going to seal that up because that's a whole nother podcast. But one of the things that I love that you do, and I kind of want to leave it on this, is when you stay in an Airbnb, if you cannot give a 5-star review, you don't leave a review.
Correct.
But you email them and you give them the feedback on why you couldn't give the 5-star review.
Correct.
And I think that that is one of the best examples of compassionate accountability because you're not hurting their business, because short-term rentals live and die by their reviews.
Yes.
So you're doing nothing to harm their business, but you're giving them an opportunity to improve because someone else might have the same experience that you've had and not be so kind and leave a bad review, which could really hurt their business.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a awesome way of being and an awesome example of compassionate accountability that I wanted to highlight.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I had not even thought of that. So maybe I could use that as an example now when I talk about this subject.
So with all of that being said, sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.